Threxon allowed himself a cold smile. They still use combustion engines, he said. Primitive. One of his subcommanders, Resolok, sneered at the image of hulking human war machines. Their tanks, clunky and slow, chugging along the battlefield. That, Abrams, what a relic. This will be easier than expected. Meanwhile, on the surface, Sergeant Mike Cassidy sat in the cramped confines of his M1 Abrams tank. The hum of the engine vibrated beneath him, steady and familiar. Cassidy had been through wars before, though nothing quite like this. He wiped the sweat from his brow and adjusted his helmet. Peering through the narrow slit of the tank's viewport at the horizon, where the alien ships hovered like storm clouds, his crew, Private Diaz, Specialist Jackson, and Corporal Thompson, sat in silence, the weight of what was coming pressing down on them. Diaz broke the tension. Think they'll even see us coming, Sarge? We're a little old-fashioned compared to that. Cassidy chuckled dryly. Doesn't matter what they see, Diaz. What matters is what they don't expect. Over the past weeks, Earth's defenders had scrambled to prepare for this moment. The initial orbital defenses had fallen quickly, unable to match the firepower of the Tyrannies. But ground combat, that was something else entirely. Cassidy had faith in the Abrams, in its raw power, its resilience. He had faith in his crew. They weren't flying fancy ships or commanding energy weapons, but they had grit. And sometimes, grit was all you needed. The order to advance came through the radio. Cassidy's grip on the controls tightened. All right, boys. Let's show these bastards what Earth has to offer. As the M1 Abrams rumbled forward, the alien hovercrafts descended to meet them. The Tyrannies, in their sleek, shielded vessels, glided effortlessly over the terrain, their movements smooth and efficient. From the safety of his command ship, Threxon watched, unimpressed. Send a message to the human leaders, he ordered. Tell them to surrender. These toys of theirs won't last 5 minutes. On the ground, the first shots were fired. Alien energy blasts streaked through the air, striking the Earth forces. The tanks shuddered under the impact, but the thick armor of the Abrams held firm. Cassidy's tank jolted slightly as a blast hit their side, but the crew remained focused. We're still here, he growled. Let's make 'em pay. Cassidy's fingers danced over the controls as he lined up his shot. The Abrams' main cannon thundered, launching a shell that slammed into the side of a hovercraft. The impact was catastrophic. The alien ship's shields flickered, then shattered as the vehicle exploded in a shower of sparks and debris. On the command ship, Threxon sat up, narrowing his eyes at the display. What was that? Resolok's earlier confidence wavered. It appears their projectile weaponry is more effective than anticipated. Another shell from Cassidy's tank found its mark, taking down a second alien craft. The Abrams continued to advance, shrugging off the alien fire, its thick treads grinding over the scorched earth. In the distance, more tanks joined the fray, and soon the battlefield was alive with fire and smoke. The Tyrannies, expecting an easy victory, began to falter. Inside the tank, Diaz let out a whoop of triumph as the third alien hovercraft disintegrated in the distance. Did you see that? We got him. Cassidy wasn't celebrating yet. Stay focused, Diaz. They're not done. They're just starting to realize we're not as easy as they thought. Back on the Orion's Talon, Threxon's amusement had turned to irritation. These humans, they're stubborn. Their technology is crude, but their weapons effective. He stood from his command chair, glaring at the screens displaying the battlefield. His pride had been wounded. Tell all ground units to focus on their tanks. Eliminate them, or this could turn into a real battle. As more Tyrannies hovercraft descended into the chaos, Cassidy prepared his crew for the coming storm. The aliens had underestimated them, and now they were paying for it. The M1 Abrams, once mocked as a relic, was proving to be far more than the aliens could handle. Cassidy smiled grimly to himself as the tank rolled forward, engines roaring. They thought we were weak, he said. Let's show them what humans can do. The battlefield was littered with smoking wreckage as alien hovercraft crumbled under the relentless barrage of the M1 Abrams tanks. What the Tyrannies had expected to be a brief, effortless conquest was rapidly devolving into a fierce and unforgiving fight. The sleek, shimmering vessels that had seemed so invincible now lay shattered across the landscape, their energy shields no match for the sheer physical force of human weaponry. Inside his Abrams, Sergeant Cassidy scanned the battlefield, taking in the scene with grim satisfaction. "They're learning, boys," he muttered, his voice crackling through the intercom. "But they're learning slow." The Tyrannies' forces had regrouped after their initial shock. Hovercraft that had once flown confidently above Earth's soil now kept their distance, skimming low and firing cautiously. They had shifted tactics, but Cassidy knew it wouldn't be enough. The Abrams tanks were built for sustained combat, and they had the endurance to keep going long after the aliens' delicate technology faltered. "Targets on the right," came Corporal Thompson's voice, urgent but steady. Cassidy pivoted his tank, the massive treads crunching over debris. He spotted a formation of alien hovercraft attempting to flank them, their energy weapons lighting up the twilight. Without hesitation, Cassidy lined up his shot. The tank's cannon roared, the recoil jarring the crew but sending another shell hurtling through the air. It struck the nearest hovercraft dead on. The impact shattered its shield in a spectacular burst of light, and the craft spiraled out of control before crashing in a flaming heap. "Another one down," Cassidy grunted. "Keep him coming." The aliens, once so arrogant, were now scrambling. High in orbit, aboard the Orion's Talon, High Commander Threxon watched the battle unfold with increasing frustration. The once decisive invasion had stalled. His troops, highly advanced and battle-hardened, were being outmatched by what he had dismissed as inferior human technology. It was a mistake that had cost him dearly. "These tanks," Threxon hissed, his yellow eyes narrowing at the displays. "They should have been nothing but relics." He gestured to one of his officers. "What do they call them?" His aide, a lower-ranking Tyranny soldier, hesitated before responding. "The humans call them M1 Abrams, Commander. Our troops have started calling them the Iron Beast." Threxon's lips curled in disgust at the name. Iron Beast absurd. But despite his scorn, there was no denying the effectiveness of these so-called beasts. They were cumbersome, slow compared to Tyranny's craft, yet their brute force made them terrifying opponents. Unlike the Tyranny's hovercraft, which relied on sophisticated energy fields, the tanks seemed almost indestructible in comparison, their armor shrugging off hit after hit. On the ground, Private Diaz let out a low whistle as they passed another smoldering alien wreckage. "Sarge, I think they're scared of us. Look at them. They're falling back." Cassidy remained focused, watching as the aliens regrouped. "They're not scared, Diaz. They're just figuring out they need a new game plan." He glanced at the horizon, where fresh waves of Tyranny's reinforcements were beginning to materialize. Larger hovercraft, heavily armed and more heavily shielded than the earlier units, were moving into position. Looks like they found it. The aliens were sending in their heavy artillery now. Massive hovercraft, bristling with weaponry, loomed above the battlefield, their shields shimmering like rippling water. These new war machines dwarfed the previous ones in size and firepower, designed to overwhelm the Abrams with sheer force. Cassidy clenched his jaw. This was going to be a fight. "All right, crew," he called over the intercom. "We've seen worse. Just another day in the office." The first barrage from the alien behemoth struck, rattling the tank and making the ground tremble. Cassidy's crew scrambled to maintain control, but the Abrams stayed intact. Jackson, working the targeting system, locked onto one of the new alien craft. "Locked in, Sarge. Ready when you are." Cassidy's voice was cold and steady. "Fire." The cannon roared, and the shell tore through the air, slamming into the alien craft's shield. This time, the shield didn't collapse immediately. It wavered, absorbing some of the kinetic energy before flickering dangerously. But it wasn't enough. The second shell, fired moments later, tore straight through, hitting the alien machine with a bone-rattling explosion. A cheer went up inside the tank, but Cassidy wasn't celebrating yet. "That's one," he said, watching as the rest of the alien formation advanced. "Keep your focus. We've got more where that came from." The aliens, desperate to turn the tide, continued their assault. But for every new tactic they tried, the Abrams adapted. Human ingenuity and the sheer durability of their machines were proving to be the perfect counter to the Tyranni's over-engineered, fragile technology. Every shot from the tanks chipped away at the Tyranni's forces. Every shell a reminder that brute force still had its place on the battlefield. As the battle wore on, the Tyranni's commanders realized the full extent of their miscalculation. The M1 Abrams tanks, once dismissed as obsolete, were not just surviving, they were dominating. The Iron Beasts had become the stuff of nightmares for the alien soldiers, unstoppable juggernauts that refused to fall. Back aboard the Orion's Talon, Threxon could only watch in disbelief as another of his heavy hovercraft exploded in a ball of fire. His forces were being crushed, his invasion stalled. He clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "This isn't over," he growled. "We'll find a way to destroy those Iron Beasts." But as the Abrams tanks continued their advance, it was clear that the Tyrannies had a new enemy to fear, and Earth was far from conquered. High Commander Threxon stood rigid on the Orion's Talon, watching the battlefield monitors with a cold fury burning in his chest. His soldiers, his elite Tyrannies warriors, were being torn apart by what he had once deemed inferior human technology. The Iron Beasts, as they had come to call the M1 Abrams tanks, were unlike anything the Tyrannies had faced before. Their energy shields, which had rendered their technology superior for centuries, were crumbling under the relentless barrage of human artillery. But Threxon was not one to surrender. "If their primitive machines are stronger than we anticipated, we will adapt," he growled. "Send in the Colossus mechs." Below, on the ground, Sergeant Cassidy and his crew were locked in the fight of their lives. The wreckage of alien hovercraft lay scattered across the landscape, but the battle was far from over. Through the haze of smoke and dust, Cassidy could see them, massive, towering machines stomping forward on mechanical legs, each one nearly twice the size of an Abrams. The Colossus mechs were the Tyranni's final answer, their last bid to overwhelm Earth's defenses. Diaz's voice crackled over the intercom, tight with tension. "Sarge, those things are huge. They're gonna crush us." Cassidy's eyes narrowed as he sized up the new threat. "Not if we crush them first." He scanned the battlefield, analyzing the terrain. These mechs might be larger and more heavily armed, but their size made them vulnerable. "Jackson, we need to take them down before they get too close. Aim for the legs." Jackson's hands flew over the targeting controls, locking in on the nearest Colossus. The Abrams cannon roared to life, sending a shell streaking toward the massive machine. It struck the mech's leg, shattering the outer armor but failing to bring it down. "Didn't penetrate," Jackson said through gritted teeth. "Again," Cassidy ordered, his voice calm but firm. "Keep hitting the legs. We'll topple him." The Colossus mechs advanced slowly, their energy weapons firing relentlessly at the human forces. The ground shook beneath their feet as they crushed everything in their path. Cassidy's tank lurched as a blast struck nearby, but the Abrams held firm. Inside the tank, the crew braced themselves, sweat dripping down their faces as they prepared for another volley. Diaz's hands trembled on the controls. "They're getting closer, Sarge. We've got to move." Cassidy nodded. "Keep us moving, Diaz. Zigzag pattern. Don't let them get a clean shot." The Abrams rumbled into motion, weaving through the wreckage-strewn battlefield. Above them, the Colossus mechs loomed like towering giants, their energy cannons firing at anything that moved. But they were slow, cumbersome. Cassidy knew that if his tank could stay mobile, they could outmaneuver these massive war machines. Jackson fired again, this time hitting a critical joint in one of the mech's legs. The leg buckled under the strain, and with a groaning, mechanical wail, the Colossus began to topple. It crashed to the ground in a thunderous explosion, sending a plume of dirt and debris into the air. "One down," Cassidy said, grim satisfaction in his voice. "But there's more coming." High Commander Threxon, watching from the command ship, clenched his fist as he saw the first of his Colossus mechs fall. "Focus fire on their tanks," he barked at his officers. "They can't be allowed to win." On the battlefield, the Tyranni's troops shifted their tactics, pouring all their firepower into the remaining human tanks. Energy blasts rained down and several Abrams tanks exploded in fireballs, their crews lost in the chaos. Cassidy's tank shuddered under the barrage, the armor groaning as it absorbed the blows. "We can't keep taking this," Diaz shouted. "We're running out of space, and they're pinning us down." Cassidy's mind raced, searching for an opening, a way to turn the tide. The city's ruins loomed ahead, an urban wasteland that could serve as a natural shield. "Head for the city," he ordered. "We can use the buildings for cover. They won't be able to hit us as easily in close quarters." Diaz gunned the engine, and the Abrams roared toward the city's outskirts. The Colossus mechs followed, slower now, but still relentless. As the tank entered the maze of ruined buildings, Cassidy knew this was their best shot. The narrow streets and collapsed structures would limit the mech's maneuverability, forcing them into tight spaces where their size would work against them. As they moved deeper into the city, Cassidy radioed the remaining tanks. "All units, fall back to the city. We'll take them down one by one." Inside the urban labyrinth, the battle became a deadly game of cat and mouse. The Colossus mechs, too large to navigate the narrow streets effectively, struggled to find their targets. Meanwhile, the Abrams tanks, smaller and more agile, used the terrain to their advantage. Cassidy's crew worked in perfect sync, firing from hidden positions, striking the mech's vulnerable joints and legs. One by one, the towering war machines collapsed, their once unstoppable might crumbling before the human onslaught. The Tyranni's forces, so confident in their technological superiority, were being dismantled by a force they had vastly underestimated: human resilience. As the last Colossus fell, High Commander Threxon's control room was silent. He had lost. His forces were decimated, his invasion broken. He stared at the battlefield, now dominated by human tanks and wrecked alien technology. Cassidy, watching the smoldering remains of the final mech, took a deep breath. "Looks like they didn't have an answer after all," he said, his voice weary but triumphant. Back aboard the Orion's Talon, Threxon's lips curled in a snarl. "This is not the end," he whispered, vowing to return. But for now, Earth stood victorious, the Iron Beasts having once again proven their worth. The fight was over, but the legend of the M1 Abrams, of humanity's unbreakable spirit, had just begun.